Hi, welcome back to building a web app with the Need Stack. So the Need Stack is a stack of technology that uses Nest.js and Express on the back end, Angular on the front end, and the entire application is written using TypeScript. So the last time, what we are trying to build is we're trying to build a Trello clone, and so far we have got uh, we have we've written this. So a Trello is consists of a board with cards. So in our case, this is the board, and then these are our cards. Okay, so our board will have things like the title created by who, some comments, and then every card will have its description and the priority. Okay, so last week, the last time, what we have is this. So let me run this first. Okay, so it's building, you know, and so this is what we have done so far. Okay, so in this week, what we're going to do is this: we are now going to bind, use Angular to interact with these forms, with this form that we've created. So before we do that, we need to look at how Angular works with how to use Angular with forms. Angular provides two ways of working with form. The first way, the two ways, the first way is called a template-driven form, and the second is called reactive form. So we are going to use the latter, which is reactive form. To use reactive form, what you need to do is this: you need to create a form model. By the way, reactive form is, I believe, is a lot more flexible than template-driven. So that's why we're going to use this. Okay, so to use reactive form, the first thing you need to do is this: you need to create a model inside inside our component, a form model inside our component, and then once you've created a form model, you map the individual elements in the form module, in the form model, into our HTML form. So into this form. Okay. So what this allow? So once the mapping is complete, any changes, uh, anytime when your user types some data into the form, that information will be captured by the model. Anytime when you change the model, like for example, adding a new field or removing a field, that gets reflected in the HTML form. And once this is done, we can now take the information that is captured in the form model, and we export that into our into our domain model. For example, like our our TypeScript class, that represents this piece of data. Okay, so let's set up the model first. Let's set up the form first. So to use Angular form, right? Okay, so git. So we are part two. So I'm going to create a new branch for this. So I'll call it part three. Okay, so let's just look at it. Okay, so we're in part three, and I'm going to go to front end, which is where the Angular is, and I'll do a in here. Okay, so to use form, the first thing you need to do is this: you need to import the forms module into your application. So you will import the forms module. Okay. Okay. Now we will add this in here. Reactive forms module. Okay. So we import this in. So what this one does is this: when you import it in, the forms module and the reactive form module will allow us to access some services like a form builder, which I'll get more into it, once we start using it, and also some directives, some attributes, some extra attributes, directives that we can add into our HTML to perform the binding. Okay, so once we have added those two modules, we can now go ahead and build our model. So before we can build our model, we need to understand a few things first. So in Angular reactive form, right, there is this concept called a control. A control is anything that captures information. For example, like an input. So these two are input, like a text area. You have sliders. We don't have sliders here, but you can map sliders. You can map combo boxes. You can map check boxes, and in our case, if we have got drop down boxes like select, you can map that. So those are controls. Then you can group controls into their logical groupings. For example, this is a card. This represents a card in our control. And so so a card has two controls, and then we can say, this two control forms a group. Okay, so since these are multiple uh, cards, each of them is a group. Okay, you can combine similar groups into an array. So for example, I've got multiple cards, right? So multiple groups that represents card, I can put them into an array. Then I can manipulate this as an array. And finally, the form itself, the whole component itself, the whole form itself is actually a group which means made up of controls and arrays, and other groups if you have other groups, right? So so when you create a model, a form model, you are basically constructing this form programmatically using form groups, form arrays, and form controls. Okay, so let's see how this is done. So let's go back to our. Oh, I've got an error here. So let's have forms. Module. Oh, not called form. Okay, right. Mm, let's see. I don't know what happened here. Okay, so module line 15, line 15. Okay, so there's an error here. Okay, right. So we clear that. Okay, so let's go ahead and now create our model. Okay, so what we're going to do is this: we will now create this model. So we will go to the our TypeScript file here. Okay, and to help us to construct these controls and arrays and groups, the forms module exports a service called a form builder. Okay, so you can get the service and inject it into your component. So a service is basically a reusable component, that you can that your application can get access to. And later on in our course, we will create our own service. Okay, so for the time being, if you don't understand, doesn't matter. Just we're just going to use it. Okay, so the service is called a form builder. Okay, and you're going to get it from the forms view. Okay, so that's a forms builder. And the way we're going to do is this: we're going to inject this into our component like so. Okay, so let me just align these guys first. Okay, right. Okay, so now we've got the builder. We will now start building out our form. Okay, so we will start with the card here. So I will use a few helper methods. I'll create a few helper methods. Okay, so I'll call this method create card. So it's a function that will return a form group. Okay, so we will use the builder. Okay, so we're going to create a group. So we're going to create this guy, and the group takes an object, takes a dictionary, an object, and then we will now add our two controls. So the controls need to have names. Okay, so I'll call this description and this priority. So we'll give, so the key is the name, and then we'll say this is a control, and we'll use the builder to create a control, this control, and then we can pass in the initial value of the field. So that's one. So we'll do the second one, which is priority. So that's the second one. Okay, we can remove that. Okay, so this function will create a card, which is represented by a group. Then we're going to create a helper method to create this array. Let's call this cards with an S from array. Okay, and then we're going to return this from builder array. We're going to pass in an empty array first. It's not going to have anything. Okay, and finally, we will create this whole form itself. We'll call it create bot. And it's going to return a form group. Okay, so it's going to be very similar to the create card. So let's look at this guy. So the form itself, the whole form itself consists of four fields, 1, 2, 3, 4, the array. Okay, so and each of these needs to have a name. So I'm going to call this title, created by comments, and this array I'm going to call cards. So like this. So the first one is title. It's going to be control. The second one, it's going to be created by. Okay. The third one is going to be comments. The third control is going to be comments. And the last one is going to be cards. Okay. So, so I've got this method already down here. So I'll just call create cards to create a card. Okay. So now when I call create bot, it's going to go and set up the model for me, the form model for me. Okay, it's going to set up form model for me. So I will have one method here that just says initialize form. And this method is going to just call create bot. Okay, and I'll assign this to a member in this class, which I've yet to define. I'm going to call this bot group. Okay, so up here. So the type is form group. Okay, and also later on for convenience, I'm going to need to add and remove elements from the card. So I'll make a reference to this array, to the cards array, like this. So I'll create another thing called the cards array. So since I've already created array, I'll just grab the array from the bot group. So this bot group, okay, using the get method, and then I'm going to say cards. So this name is this name here, right? And I'll cast it to a form array. Okay, so the get cards returns an abstract control, and the abstract control is a superclass of a group, array, and controls. Okay, so if you look at here, I'll get a whole bunch of errors. That's because I have not imported any of these classes that I'm using. So just come here. So form group, form array. Okay, so finally, okay, so I need to do this cards array. Okay, so finally, just before we end, so in the ng on init, so this is the lifecycle method. I'll just call this initialize form. So a lifecycle method, this ng on init method will be called when this component is created. So this is the lifecycle method. Okay. So if you don't know what's a life cycle method, just go Angular, Angular life cycle hooks. Okay. So that's the Angular life cycle method. Okay. I'll just copy and stick it here. Okay. So we have now created the form, the model. So let's make sure that there's no error. Okay, so let's reload this, make sure that there's no error. Okay, so now we have created this model. Uh, we will now need to map this model to the HTML form. So we will do that in our next part of this series. So thank you very much and see you in the next installment.